Hey, software developers, what is going on? It is episode 26 time, and we are going to continue down the React road, moving our code from MVC into React. So, without further ado, let us jump in. Quick recap of where we left off. We have our React app basic application up and running, and we installed Bootstrap. So the next thing we want to do is take a look at our UI and start to put together the pieces of the puzzle, right? So the pieces of the puzzle are this nav bar at the top, the footer at the bottom, and then the page content itself here in the body, and that includes this title here. So let's take a look at our MVC. We can look in our views shared underscore layout.cshtml, and that holds all of our HTML that makes the template of our Savage Cell site. So I think the easiest way to get started with this, kind of see what's left out, is to grab just this header from header to /header, and we'll bring that over into React. Now, some of these things are not going to work. All these ASP, area and controller and action, all of these down here, and these are kind of routing links, right? Because these are, if you look on the web page, that's these up here, products and privacy in this top nav. So we're going to want to figure out how to set up a router in React so that when we click on products, we go to /products. When we click on privacy, I don't know if that one even works, it goes to home privacy, even though we don't have one of those yet. So we need to be able to replicate building out a menu system in React. And that's going to be a little different. So that's why this ASP specific code here isn't going to be the same, but it's going to be very similar. So let's go ahead and not worry about the A tag here and the actual routes down here. Let's try and build this header, because you see this navbar expand SM, navbar toggleable. All of these things here come from Bootstrap. So since we already have Bootstrap in React, it should be able to just pick up these classes and draw for the most part. So let's grab our header, and I'm going to copy that. And then we'll go to our React app, and we're going to find this app.tsx in the source folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of replace all this code that's here. Right now, all we have is this. So let's go in here and let's get rid of this div totally, and in between these parens we're going to paste our header. So there's immediately some things that aren't working right, and we're going to get to those in 1 second. So the other thing that I want to point out is that we're importing some CSS for this page from app.css. Well, all the styles, if we look in that file, all the styles that are in here are for that sample page with the spinning logo on it. We don't need any of that. So I'm going to select all with Control A, and I'm going to delete the contents of app CSS. And we may add some stuff in here later, but for now, I want to start with a blank slate. We also are no longer importing a logo. The logo is just this spinning thing, and we're not using that in our application. So let's get rid of that. And we actually don't need to import React from React anymore as of React, I think, 17. Gotta have your water break. One thing that you have to realize about React is that it can create JavaScript classes from these tags. While these tags look like HTML, they're actually called JSX, and these are all representations of classes that are given to you by JSX and in turn by React. So because these become actual JavaScript classes, you really can't use the name class here inside because it kind of conflicts with the JavaScript class nomenclature. So what we want to do is we want to change all of these classes to something else. Now, when it renders in HTML eventually, we want it to be class because that's what our browser understands. If I right-click this page and go to inspect, you can see that there are class equals this, class equals that inside all of these HTML tags. So what React gives us is a built-in attribute called class name with a capital N. So I can make this error go away by changing class to class name, and then it's happy. And that'll render as class equals. So now I'm going to hit Control F, and I'm going to hit this little toggle replace button, and I'm just going to say, I'm going to undo this class name so I can do them all at once. I'm going to say find class, or if you really want to make sure that you don't have any collisions, you could do class equal and change that to class name equal. And if I hit this button over here, I can replace all of them. And so now we're looking a lot better. We have a lot less errors. This is complaining because this is an A tag without an href. Really, we don't want an A tag here at all. But for now, just to make this go away, let's take away these ASP area controller and actions. We're just going to put an href equal quote, and we'll just put a hashtag, £, whatever you want to call that in there for now. And we'll do the same thing with these guys down here. And even though this is not valid React, it'll still build with a warning. And so let's see where we are with this. So if I hit save, it's of course complaining about that href. But if we look at our React app, you can see that if we just look at the nav here, it's pretty much the same. All right, so let's keep going. So before we add routing in here to make all of this stuff work properly, I wanted to go through the basics of how React works. So if we look in this public folder here, there's an index.html. And index.html is the default page that we are serving up right now in our development server. So localhost 3000 defaults to loading that index.html page. That index.html page sets things up like the viewport and some basic meta tag content, sets up icons for Apple Touch, and gives a manifest JSON. So the title here that says React App is actually what's getting loaded inside our tab here. That's where we're getting this, and the favicon is all coming from this index page. The real magic here happens with this div right here, the div ID of root. If we look at the source of this page, the actual view page source by right-clicking, you'll see that there's something in here that's not in the actual index.html page. Here's that div ID root that we just looked at, and there's a big comment section here. But if you notice line 42 right here, it's loading 3 JavaScript files. And if you look in the actual HTML, there's that comment section, but there's nothing after it. So what the development server is doing for us is it's compiling everything inside source, and it's turning it into JavaScript. And it doesn't put everything in one JavaScript file. In this case, it's creating 3 files. So you've got your static bundle.js, you've got your vendor's main chunk, and you've got your main chunk. So what is all this? The bundle is most of React, And the vendors is any third-party NPM packages that we've installed, like Bootstrap, right? That's going to be created and brought in through this main chunk, and anything else we add. And then the last one, main chunk.js, most likely has our custom code in it. And we can also control these chunks. As we add additional functionality to our site, we can add our own chunks in there, with the idea being that we could do some kind of like lazy loading thing where the whole site doesn't have to download into the browser, and maybe you only want to bring in the pages that I navigate to. And so we can kind of split those up. If I don't need to go to the admin section of our site, why download that JavaScript bundle to the browser and take up memory with that? So we'll get into some of those advanced topics later, but that's basically what's going on here. Is the development server is turning all of our code into these JavaScript files, and the JavaScript gets executed. So again, remember, and I'll show it to you back in here, remember this div ID root, because one of those JavaScript bundles is actually going to say load and run what's inside index.tsx. That's where we're going to start. So if we look inside here, what this does is it turns on this strict mode. Remember, they look like HTML, but they're actually code classes. We turn on strict mode, and then we load the app component, which is defined in app.tsx. And then anything else inside app, app could also have other things in it that it loads from other pages. So all of that is going to be loaded and passed as an argument to render. So think about these classes here being turned into objects that are passed to render, or better yet, functions that are passed to render. And the output of those functions is HTML and JavaScript. So React will render this as HTML, all styled up with our CSS. It will do a document.getElementById for the ID of root. That ID of root is this div back in this public index.html. So it'll find this root div, and it'll put the entire site as a child or inside of this div. Once we download that div and we download the code, when we navigate around from place to place, when we click on links, when we change views and change pages in React, we're not really calling back to a server and navigating anywhere. All we're doing is we're putting different content inside that div ID root, and we can update just tiny little bits of the pages that are shown. And that's why you don't have all those postbacks, and you don't have all the site flickering. And that's why we can make things much more interactive, because we can react to things like hovers and mouse enterings and mouse leaving zones and validations in text boxes. We don't have to fill out a form and then hit submit, wait for it to go to the server, and then come back to us to say, oh, there's an error. We can tell you about that error because we're running JavaScript, we're in the client's browser, and we can react to things and make them very interactive. So that's an advantage of client side versus server side. And with that, there's also a video that I made previously that kind of shows the server side versus client side. But in a nutshell, that's kind of how it works. So back in our index.tsx, what we want to do is we want to go into app, and we want to add some kind of a router. So the first thing we're going to do is we've got to bring in the router. Well, if you've not used React before, React does not dictate what router you use. However, if you just search for React router, this React router at reactrouter.com is pretty much the standard. I have seen A few people use a different router, but those other routers aren't really used as much as this one is, at least from my experience. Okay, so as of this video, React Router version 6 is what we're going to be using. So if we go to the documentation and go to installation, we can click on Create React App, but that's going to give us instructions after the basic installation. So we have our choice of npm yarn or pnpm, and we used npm. So I'm going to stick with npm, and all we got to do is npm install React Router DOM at 6, and I'm going to also save that. So let's open up our command prompt. I'm going to add -- save to the end of that so that it saves it in my package.json. And we'll hit enter and let it install React Router. And then if we look back on the web page for Create React App, it's telling us to go into our index.js, which we know is our index.tsx, and we're going to import the browser router from the React Router DOM and wrap our app in a router. Sounds crazy, but it's actually really easy. We're just going to copy this line here, which imports our browser router from React Router DOM. And this is in index.tsx. So I'm going to add my browser router there. And then we're going to add this browser router inside our render method. Now I'm going to do mine inside strict mode because I want everything to be governed by strict mode. And so if I wrap my app in browser router, then mine looks just like theirs with browser router with app inside. All right, and then it says now you can use React Router anywhere in your app. So what happens is because app is a child of browser router, then browser router is going to be available to app because it can just reach up to its parent, and we'll do that mostly with hooks. But in this case, we're going to define our routes. All right, so what I want to do is go into my app.js. I want to copy this import. And if I go into my app.tsx, and we're going to import our React Router DOM there. And I'm going to copy these routes. And the routes are going to go after the header. So this is going to be a problem for React because React expects one return element. So we had just a header node, and now we're adding in another root level JSX object here. So what we want to do is either surround it in a div, that would work, or React gives us kind of an empty. We can just do an empty JSX tag, and that will do what a div does, but it doesn't actually have to render a div. It'll just treat it as a non-rendering single node, and then we're happy again. So really what we're saying is we've got the header, and then we've got routes. Well, if we look back at our MVC, we had our header, and then we had this main role main, and then we rendered our body inside that. So really what we want to do in React is we want to have this main role equal main, and then instead of render body, we'll just let the React router render whichever page we want in between main and /main. So making that the same after header, I've got main and /main, and now I can just put this routes inside there. And I'm only going to do one first because we need a products link and we need a privacy link, and I don't have those yet. Let's go ahead and right click source and make a new folder, and I'm going to call this views. And inside views, I'm going to make another new folder, and we're going to call this products. And then inside products, I'm going to make a new file called products.tsx. And then also inside that same products folder, I'll make a new file called products.css. And so now we also would have a view. If I right-click views and do new folder, I could have privacy. And then inside privacy, I would have, you guessed it, privacy.tsx and privacy, new file, privacy.css. So now my views folder has room for all the different views that I'm going to route to. It just kind of organizes well that way. I want an empty React component put in here. So I recommend going to the extensions. And I already have it installed, but if you search for React and you see this one here, ES7 Redux GraphQL React Native Snippets by DSZNAJDER. Not even going to attempt to pronounce that, but you can see that there's almost 4 million downloads. It's awesome. So, and what it gives you is a bunch of templates where you can just put in these little codes, the ones we're going to use. So we're going to use mostly this RFC, which just gives you the import React, which we don't need, but it also gives us just a really basic function. So we can make that ready for Typescript. Remember RFC for a minute here. But if we go back to the top, it tells us that if we add, notice it supports TypeScript. So if we add TS before any snippet, then it'll give us the TypeScript version of that template. And it also says React 17 is supported by the underscore prefix. This is like a 50-50 shot of whether it works or not. It usually does not work for me, so it's probably less than 50-50. I have had it work, though, and I don't know what I did differently. But anyway, once you find this extension, go ahead and click install. And if it asks you to restart your IDE, go ahead and click restart and it'll relaunch in here. You will have to restart your terminals if you do that. But I already have this installed, so it's going to give me some of the things I need. So I'll try it, but underscore TS RFC, and then I'll hit tab, and of course it didn't work. So I don't need this underscore in here. That's wrong. And I also don't need to import React. The underscore was supposed to just have it do this, exactly like we have it. It just doesn't always work. So for now, we're not passing any props to our React app. We will just leave that empty, and this is going to be unused. But for now, we will just return a div with products component. So now back in the app TSX, we can go and create our route saying that when the path is the default path, which is just slash, or when someone types slash products, we could put that in as well. We want you to load into the element, and the element describes what component you want to load. So not home in our case, we have products. And in order to have products, if we click on that and click on the little light bulb, it's not showing it for whatever reason. I don't know why it doesn't see it, but we can go import it ourselves. So I'm going to do an import products from, and then we just will go, and here's a problem I've been having, and I haven't solved this yet. It gives me the snippets for that plugin instead of the actual IntelliSense that I need. So if I just hit escape and start typing views, then it comes back with the right thing. So where was that? That's interesting. So I'll just hit enter on views, and hit slash. Again, if I just start typing products slash products. And so basically in the views products folder, grab the module called products. We're going to call it products, and that way this guy is now happy loading products with the correct route. So if we just save that and run that, or if we save it and let the hot reload happen, doesn't look like it worked. Let's refresh. There we go. I don't know why I needed to refresh, but so you can see it's loading the products component inside the main body. There's nothing in there but text, so it's just sticking it up on the top. And then the last thing that we have here is the footer down here. So let's go into our MVC app. And we have our header, we have our main, and then we have this footer. So I'm just going to grab footer, and we will bring that guy in right below main. And what does this have? So we got to replace our class name. So this is where that class equals will come in handy, because if we would have just said class before and replaced with class name, it would have matched all of these classes and renamed this class name, and that would have been wrong. So, but now we're saying just look for class equals, so I can just re-hit the replace all. And so that looks good now. And now we have another A tag here that's kind of going, we're going to get rid of all this stuff. But we really want to kind of replace that with a link to the privacy. And we'll do that after. So let's just put another warning in our code. But let's save that and go back to our React app. And so the footer looks pretty good. I mean, it's obviously up a little high right now because there's no body content, but that looks good. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to hook up these two links, and actually this is clickable too, so we'll hook that up as well. And so we have, if you remember at the top, this link object from React Router DOM. So we're going to use that. And we're going to replace these A tags with a link tag. So we will do a link, and the link to is going to be slash, and what's going to show is this guy. So we'll get rid of that and move it in there. And then we can use this navbar brand class name in this link to make it look right and get rid of this A tag completely. So we've just replaced the A with a link. We're saying when you click on this, just go to the slash, the default page, and then that will match with this route down here in main, and it'll load that product. So let's see if that works. You won't really be able to see anything, but you can tell that I can go to the products page, right? If I was on privacy, and it said privacy, and I click on this, it's going to go back to the index and load products. So we're going to do the same thing we did here, really, for the products. It's just going to have different text in it. So I'm going to just copy that link line on 12, and I'm going to put it in here, and then products is what we want the link to display. And I'm going to grab these class names here too for navlink and dark text dark, because those are the styles of the links. And now I don't need this A class. And then same thing for the last one, which this one I can just replace and make it a link and a slash link. And now that one's done. And because we already hooked up the routes here, everything is cool. So if we look at these, now if you watch the text here and the route here, I can go to slash, oh, that didn't work. Maybe I have to refresh. No, what didn't work? I didn't do something right. Oh, so in this privacy, I'm telling it link to here. I want to link to privacy for the privacy link, and / will work fine for products. So we have our link to / going to products. We have our link to privacy going to privacy. One other thing we need is this same link to privacy that's down here. So, whoops. So we can put one of those in here. And then we can get rid of that so that it just is a link. And that's on its own line now, which is not good. So we could just put Savage Cell here. Let's see if that's enough to put it on this. It's not. So in the footer here, privacy is going to its own line. It's still working, but we kind of want it up here. So let's inspect that element and see what's going on. So it's rendering as an A tag, which looks okay. But I think we need to make that an inline instead of a blocking. As you can see when I highlight this, look at how much room that privacy is taking up. So if I had a style on there, and we can test this, where I can say display inline, then you notice it jumps up, and now it's only taking up its own space and its own, padding. So I think we need to add that display inline. So to do that, of course, if I refresh this browser, it's going to go back to the way it was. So if we go into app CSS and do a, let's say display, dot display inline in line, and we can just do display inline, and then we can add that class to this. We could do it here, and is that going to work? Why didn't that work? Let's inspect it again. It looks like display inline is not being, it's being overridden by the nav link. So we can just tell it that this is important by putting the important on it, and then that'll override that nav link for that one. We still got some weird spacing here. Let's see what we can do about that. It looks like we've got a bunch of padding. Let's remove that. So I think padding 0 is better for this. So maybe we'll add that here. Actually, I think, let's see if we can go in before we do that. Let's see if we can go in here and just put a P-0 and see if that's enough to override navlink or not. It is. So now we look better there. All right, so I think that's a really good stopping point for this episode. We brought in React Router and we hooked up our hrefs back to links so that we could route around the different pages. And in the next video, we'll fill in that products component page, kind of lay it out visually and hook it up to the API so that we can use the same existing C# web API, and we can bring that into the React project. So hope this was really informative for you. If you found it useful, please subscribe and hit the like button and thumbs up me and do all those things so that people can find out about this channel, and we can help as many people as we can learn how to code, how to have fun with this stuff. Hopefully this is nice and easy to consume. I love React, so I'm hoping that you do too. And so until next time, I will see you online.